as a campus to start us off with a land acknowledgement. Next slide, please. The Division of Equity and Inclusion acknowledges that UC Berkeley sits on the territory of Huichin, the ancestral and unceded land of the Chochenyo-speaking Ohlone people, the successors of the sovereign Verona Band of Alameda County. We recognize that every member of the Berkeley community has and continues to benefit from the use and occupation of this land since the institution's founding in 1868. Consistent with our values of community, inclusion, and diversity, we have a responsibility to acknowledge and make visible the university's relationship to Native peoples. As members of the Berkeley community, it is vitally important that we not only recognize the history of the land on which we stand, but also we recognize that the Muwekma Ohlone people are alive and flourishing members of the Berkeley and broader Bay Area communities today. This acknowledgement was co-created with the Muwekma Ohlone tribe and Native American Student Development and is a living document. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to our co-chairs, Vice Chancellor Dania Matos and Professor Chris Gutierrez to say a few words.
Thank you, Fab, and thank you to all of you for being with us today. My name is Dania Matos. I am the Vice Chancellor for Equity and Inclusion, and I use she, her, ella pronouns. The purpose of this town hall is to engage you, the community, as we move into this implementation phase of our HSI initiative, becoming an HSI institution, but also becoming a Latinx-thriving institution. We are going to cover the pre-submitted questions that so many of you submitted, and we are going to engage in a Q&A. We have invited panelists across our Berkeley community who will respond to those questions. We'll also sort of share a little bit about the framework that we are endeavoring in, as well as building a sustainable structure, and then we'll go on to next steps with that. So it's a lot to cover in an hour, but with that, I will turn it over to Fab so that we can talk about our community agreements.
Thank you, Dania. So we have some community agreements we came up, you see here. We also invite you to feel free to, if there are some that are missing, please feel free to drop them in the chat and we will abide to those agreements as best as we can. So now I want to hand it back to Dania to queue up a video from our Chancellor.
You said it perfectly, Fabs. Chancellor Chris could not be with us today, but she did send a video that we would like to play for you. And I will turn it over to our Zoom support, Steve. Thank you for playing that with us.
Thank you so much for this opportunity to help set the stage for this timely and important town hall. Ever since 2018, when we announced our commitment to becoming a Hispanic Serving Institution, I've been struck by and I've been grateful for the overwhelmingly positive response of our community and for the dedication and determination of the students, faculty, staff, and alumni who've worked so hard to develop and refine the goals, plans, and recommendations that will help make this dream come true. Thanks to their efforts, your efforts, we've arrived at a wonderful inflection point as we begin implementation of the actions necessary to achieve two distinct but interrelated goals: to become a Latinx-thriving institution and achieve federal HSI designation. I also want to express my appreciation for the evident passion and sense of purpose the two co-chairs bring to the HSI initiative. Together, our Vice Chancellor for Equity and Inclusion, Dania Matos, and Professor Chris Gutierrez provide an excellent blend of professional background, personal experience, and leadership skills that will advance this most important of institutional priorities. Yet their success, our success, depends on the extent to which members of the Cal community are included in and engaged with the work and the decisions that lie ahead. To make good on our commitment to be a campus where Latinx students thrive, to reach and sustain the status as a Hispanic serving institution will require far more than administrative actions and edicts. And that's why town halls like this, community members like you, are essential ingredients for our success. We can pull out all the stops when it comes to recruiting Latinx applicants, but absent a truly inclusive and supportive campus community, our efforts to enroll and retain the Latinx students we admit will be for naught. Becoming an HSI is about much more than simply meeting a numerical target. We're striving to create a campus where every student thrives, and that can only happen when all students have equitable access to Berkeley's extraordinary opportunities. To truly change our campus culture, to provide a true sense of belonging and an equity of experience for all, to become a Latinx-thriving institution, requires us to rise as one to ensure our deeds align with our words and with our values and our commitments. In fact, I believe that we can, through the collaborative communitarian work required to become a Latinx-thriving institution, actually model and embody the ethos and the values we wish to see in the campus community as a whole. As we advance on our shared goals in support of our shared values, we can be the change we want to see at Berkeley and far beyond. And so I urge and invite all of you to join us in supporting the HSI initiative. There's so much need for your energy and enthusiasm, and so much opportunity to make a lasting difference. With that in mind, please take advantage of the fact that today's town hall is designed to do more than provide updates and information about the road ahead. We also want and need your feedback, your ideas, and your advice. You will be contributing to an effort that goes to the very heart of all that Berkeley is and aspires to be as our nation's leading public institution of higher education. Where we lead, others follow. And so, as we seek to build a campus community whose demographics reflect the changed and changing demographics of the state we serve, the stakes are high. Even as much work remains in the realms of admissions and enrollment, I'm thrilled that we're continuing to build on last year's success when we admitted the most diverse class in 30 years. This year, we further increased the numbers of admitted Latinx, Chicanx students to 3,600, 50% more than just 4 years ago. The work we're doing to evolve our campus culture and to achieve HSI status is all the more important given the extent to which the entire university and every single member of our community stand to benefit from those achievements. I believe that Berkeley's excellence depends on diversity of thought and perspective, both of which are the result of and profoundly enhanced by the diversity of our campus community. This diversity of perspectives is critical to preparing our students to thrive and lead in a multicultural world. As the regents of the university put it in 1988 and have reaffirmed multiple times since, mindful of its mission as a public institution, the university seeks to enroll on each of its campuses a student body that, beyond meeting the university's eligibility requirements, encompasses the broad diversity of cultural, racial, geographic, and socioeconomic backgrounds characteristic of California. A true sense of belonging must know no bounds. A university where members of the Latinx community can thrive is a university where all can thrive. Berkeley was built by the people, for the people, all the people. The HSI initiative will help us ensure that will always be so.
Just some quick housekeeping before I turn it over to our co-chairs. We will be turning off the chat. There were a lot of questions that were submitted pre. You are welcome to continue to submit on the form, to email them to us. This will not be the last town hall we do, so your questions will be answered, and we'll also be answering many of them in FAQ that we don't get to today. So that said, I want to turn it over to Danya and Chris.
Yes, thank you. My name is Chris Gutierrez. I'm professor and associate dean of the Graduate School of Education. And for the past 2 years, I've had the true privilege of serving as a co-chair for the HSI initiative. I think Chancellor Chris captured so completely the way we've been thinking about the HSI. And you'll note how the Chancellor really focused on the terms thriving, that we want a thriving institution. And that's the theme that you're going to hear all through today's town hall, that all the speakers will lift up. Because as you may know, those of you who know about the HSI, know that we declared our intention to become an HSI serving institution more than several years ago. In fact, it's been a long-term goal for so many people on campus. And there's a lot of research that talks about what it means to become a Latinx serving institution. Basically, it means that the institution has to have at least 25% student enrollment to qualify. But from the very onset, in which we brought together some of the best people on campus from all sectors of the university to help us really think through this blueprint for the HSI that constitutes now the report that many of you have read. From the very onset, we were dissatisfied with the notion of Latinx serving, because we knew without changing the culture, without attending to all sectors of the university, from undergraduates to graduates to postdocs to faculty and staff, that no matter how many students we brought, if we just focused on demographics, we would not be fulfilling the mission that we collectively had crafted about becoming an HSI institution. So very quickly, and if you could switch the slide, a little bit of animation there. Go back, please. Is that we from the onset decided that we wanted to focus on becoming a Latinx-thriving institutions. So while demographics are important, they're one piece of it. And what Chancellor Chris talked about was the importance of having a new imagination about who we are as Berkeley, a different pedagogical imagination about a different way of serving students, recruiting and retaining students and faculty and staff. It required a much more holistic view of what an institution requires to really create this culture shift in which not only Latinx populations would thrive, but the beauty of this, and this is why it's such a generative moment for this institution, is that the kinds of changes and imagination we're bringing really will benefit all members of the community in ways that we can all thrive together, while also fulfilling our mission about becoming an HSI institution. So colleagues, it's a wonderful, exciting moment, a historical moment indeed, but a really important one. And we really invite all of you today to think with us, to join us in what it means to develop this thriving institution in which all people will flourish, but in particular, to begin with creating this wonderful, wonderful culture that our Latinx population will grow as well. So with that, Danya, may I turn it over to you?
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Professor Gutierrez. And it's an honor to not only honor your work as co-chair of the task force report, but also continue this journey, not only with you, but with all of you engaged on this call with our community and all of us. And so as we've said in word, but now also in deed, becoming an HSI is not a destination, right? It's a journey that we're inviting you with us on. On the right hand of this slide, you'll see that it requires intentional practices, right? And intentional institutional transformation. We're creating and shifting that narrative change so that everyone thrives. We added a couple of bullet points of the types of things to think about. What is our institution's current narrative on Latinx thriving that we're continuing to shape with our partners and with all of you? What is our current narrative on diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging, and justice? Because they are interrelated. How do those narratives shape our institutional practice, right? So the way we do things. What strategies are you utilizing to promote and encourage engagement with Latinx HSI efforts? We often say this is not the work of one, but the work of so many of us. So how are you inviting this into your departments, into your administrative units, and this critical inquiry of intentionality bringing to it, and ensuring that it goes beyond this just statements, as well as accountability. I wanted to share also that if we turn to the next slide, please. Latinx-thriving is also rooted in our mission and public good, and it feeds our goals as well. We wanted to introduce a little bit of the framework, and this one's from Excelencia in Education, and taking from the categories of their Seal of Excelencia framework. So as you can see, it's multifaceted from enrollment, retention, transfer, financial support, leadership, completion, representation of faculty, staff, and administration. And so it really permeates every fabric of our institution as well as our community. On the next slide, I wanted to tie this a little bit to how Latinx Thriving is also tied to our efforts on becoming an anti-racist campus, right? As you know, we are leading a lot of different initiatives in the space, but the critical areas that they highlight, and this particular framework is from the National Association of Diversity Officers in Higher Ed, a framework for advancing anti-racism strategy on campus that they just recently released on the different areas, looking at institutional structure, policies and procedures, resource allocation, academic equity and student success, as well as hiring, retention, and promotion, institutional programming, education, training, employee development, campus climate culture, and admissions and access. We're also really cognizant that part of the first steps in the criticality of success is building that sustainable structure. And my dog agrees on that. If you turn to the next slide, I wanted to take this moment to really acknowledge those members of community who are already doing the work. And we have some examples of our contribution. I know that's going to be put in the chat. This list is not exhaustive, but the Chicanx Latinx Standing Committee, Raices, GALS, the Latinx Caucus, Alianza, our Latinx Faculty Association, our Latinx Resource Center, our Chicano Latino Student Development Center, our Latinx Student Resource Center, and our Chicano Latinx Alumni Association. As you see, there's numerous campus partners that are already taking the steps to invest and serve the Latinx community here at Berkeley. And please know that this is not an exhaustive list, but if you don't see your name and contributions reflected, please let us know, and we're happy to add this important work. And I see that popping up in the chat as well. It's really important to ensure that we also engage in this lateral engagement approach. That means that there are not only vertical engagements, but that horizontal engagement across our deans, across cabinet, across administrative units, and across academic departments. On the next slide, we want to share and just forecast some of the ways that you can get involved as we launch these steering committee, external advisory committees, and as well as the implementation teams. They're all going to be open calls for nominations, so we invite you. It's not contingent on title, so we want all of you to be a part of it. We've dropped the link in the chat to the nomination form, and we encourage you to be a part of this in this journey with us together. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to Fab, who will moderate our Q&A with our panelists.
Thank you, Dania. So as I mentioned, we received numerous questions on various topics. And so what we did is we tried to theme them by the guests that we invited. So, and any other questions that we don't get to or answer, as I said before, we will answer via the Q&A on the website. So we've assigned questions to our panelists, and I will ask each person to introduce themselves, and I'll remind them again, we're trying to be as succinct as we can. So if you can, please keep yourself to 5 minutes. First, we have the questions that were centered around undergraduate student recruitment and funding. And for that, I'd like to turn it over to our Associate Vice Chancellor of Enrollment Management and the Dean of Admissions, Femi Ogundile. Femi?
Thank you so much, Fabrizio, and I appreciate the opportunity to be here with you all. As Fab mentioned, my name is Femi Ogundele. I'm the Associate Vice Chancellor of Enrollment and Dean of Undergraduate Admissions here, and I use the HE series. There's a series of questions, as Fab mentioned, around admissions outreach and also around financial aid, and I want to speak to some of those in the short time that I have here. I think a big piece of what we do is ensuring that our outreach efforts really match our goals. Since joining Cal in 2019, we've added 3 additional regional positions in San Diego, the Inland Empire, and LA to really strengthen our presence in those communities to enhance our diversity. We also know that we just got there and we have a lot of work to do in those communities, in those high schools, and in those community colleges. And while doing broader outreach is important, we've also emphasized making sure that we are taking care of what's happening in the shadows of our own ivory tower. So Richmond, Oakland, Vallejo, all are priorities for us here in the Bay Area. And that includes more than just visiting high schools. It means doing PIQ workshops. It means meeting with counselors and school administration to communicate our commitment and to discuss the educational landscape, especially through COVID. We're also working with community-based organizations locally and regionally, as we know their impact in communities of color are real, and they can often step into the college counseling gap that is left in K-12 public education. Another point worth noting is our Berkeley en Español website. It's a microsite that we created where all the content is in Spanish for prospective students to be able to discuss Berkeley as an option with their families in a language that they're comfortable with, because we know that the college decision is still a dinner table conversation. Our most recent initiative has been a greater collaboration with our colleagues in the Center for Educational Partnerships, Centers for Educational Equity and Excellence, and Puente, which is a community-based organization that's based in 36 high schools and 65 community colleges throughout the state, to really establish our Poder Oso initiative. Our Poder Oso initiative is a partnership and a commitment with an aim to not just recruit Latinx students, but to support and serve them once they get here on campus through their first year. We also know that admissions makes dreams possible, but really it's financial aid that makes dreams come true. And we've been active in lowering our self-help, which is the loan and work expectation, which we lowered for the first time in 5 years. And we lowered it by $200. And prior to that, it should be known that we had one of the highest self-helps in the system. And again, while lowering this is great, we hope to raise the grant and scholarship awards to our students even more significantly next year. And this is a top priority for myself and my colleague Cruz Gamaldo in financial aid and scholarships. We also celebrate the Fiat Lux scholarship that allows students to graduate debt-free, which currently has a 48 representation of Chicanx Latinx students. Similar to the work coming out of admissions with the Berkeley en Español site, the financial aid office has strengthened their communications for the Spanish-speaking community. We have a team of Spanish-speaking professionals available to support families during the workday, and we have a chat bot available to answer questions 24/7 in Spanish. And financial aid and scholarships is continuing to work towards ensuring that our key information is provided in Spanish to Chicanx and Latinx students and their families in order to successfully navigate Berkeley. And I think it's important to recognize, and it's already been stated here, but for me, when I came to Berkeley and we were having conversations around becoming a Hispanic serving institution, the most important word was never Hispanic, it was serving. And as you've already heard today here at Berkeley, we're committed to going beyond just serving and really thinking about creating an institution where Chicanx and Latinx community can thrive. All of this, all of the work that we've done so far, I think are great strides and they show movement in the right direction. But as was also mentioned, this does not prove that we've made it to our destination at all. We have a lot of work to do to change minds and beliefs about what kind of institution we are and who we want to welcome here. And I tell people all the time, if we are talking to students or counselors or alumni, and we are met with skepticism, that's skepticism that we earned as an institution through years of either dismissal or ignoring the needs of communities. And the only way to combat that skepticism is not to proclaim that we care, but to show it in our actions, in our priorities, and our commitment. So for any staff member or alumni who wants to get involved, I encourage you to be on the lookout for the HSI implementation teams when they are formed and engaged, and collaborate where you can. This effort is really going to require all of us to do our part and to serve a much broader group than just the Chicanx Latinx population on campus. So we all own this in its successes and its setbacks. And I'm looking forward to all the allies and the accomplices moving forward to build the future that we are all planning for. I'll pass it back to you, Feb. Thank you.
Thank you, Femi. So as you can imagine, we also received a number of questions around how we grow or what our plans are to grow the Latinx faculty numbers and how interested faculty can get involved. So a number of folks will be responding to that, but I first want to start with Dr. Cristina Mora.
Hi,
Hi, everyone. My name is Cristina Mora. I'm Associate Professor in Sociology, Faculty Affiliate in Chicano and Latino Studies. I'm the Co-Director of the Institute of Governmental Studies. More importantly, I'm the faculty lead of the HSI Task Force. So there were a lot of questions about how faculty can get involved. And the way I see it is that we're really at a turning point right now. Right now, Latinx faculty are less than 7% of UCB faculty. We've got a steep, steep hill to climb. Our HSI faculty plan calls for at least 10 new lines for faculty whose research, mentoring, or scholarship touch on the Latinx experience. This includes social science and humanity, but also STEM fields. We know we can do much more. We know that 10 will not be enough. So faculty on the HSI task force will keep lobbying for more. Importantly, our HSI plan also calls for campus to fund at least 15 postdocs to help diversify faculty and also create our own homegrown pipeline to the professoriate. But look, the issue is that, well, really, in my opinion, we can push Central Campus, we can push the administration to take creative and more urgent measures. The reality is, and if you're faculty on here, you know this, most FTE decisions lie within departments. We've got a decentralized format that complicates really a lot of these top-down initiatives. And if you've got some departments, I'm not going to name them, but if you've got some departments where there are no Latinx faculty, it's really hard to advocate and push for a Latinx area. For example, we still have no one teaching Latinx politics or Latinx public health. In the long run, campus is going to have to figure out how to address the structural decentralized issue if it's actually going to want to make progress. And this is why. Research on HSI shows us that while campuses can do a fantastic job and they can actually meet the 25% in the student body, guess what? They still do horribly in diversifying faculty, even when they get to HSI status. The average student to professor ratio at HSIs, the average white student to white faculty ratio at an HSI is 1 to 10. Gonna have you guess at the Latinx one? The Latinx student to Latinx faculty ratio is 1 to 146. We've got to be intentional about the role of faculty and others as we are diversifying and moving on the student piece. So what can we do? Well, I think that we really need a groundswell of support. We need advocacy within departments, especially those departments where Latinx studies faculty aren't currently present. As Femi said, HSI is not simply an issue for Latinx faculty. I'm tired. We're all tired. If you're on here, you know that you wake up and we think about HSI and lobbying efforts. We need allies. We need help. How are you going to help us? Bring the issue of HSI and faculty diversity up within faculty meetings. Keys, once again, no one's going to talk about us. No one's going to talk about HSI goals if our allies and if we're not talking about it in departmental meetings. Ask your department, ask your chair if you're actually interpreting DEI goals in a way that centralize or prioritize HSI goals. DEI goals can sometimes be difficult for departments for some reason to interpret. And some departments have done wonders with other forms of diversity, but simply have not done enough to increase Latinx representation. If you're an ally or if you're Latinx faculty, contact the Latinx Faculty Association. Join our listservs, come to our meetings. We're actively talking about working groups, ways that we can support the efforts of Chris and Danya and others on the HSI Task Force and Implementation Team. The last is the Latinx Research Center is the center of much of this advocacy as well. Contact Director Laura Perez at the LRC. See how you can support Latinx faculty and get involved in what are the latest conversations. What we've been doing now is fantastic. We need to be intentional though about faculty. 7% is hard for me to swallow. 7% makes me feel lonely. 7% makes your Latinx allies and colleagues feel lonely. And 7% makes it such that those departments that don't have anyone advocating for Latinx studies or these areas or HSI goals will continue to have that void. And I'm not sure how we're ever going to do justice to the newly beautifully created student body that we plan to have if we can't also really see the diversity so sorely needed in the professoriate. Okay, I'll turn it over to Sharon.
Thank you, Christina. Hi, everyone. I'm Sharon Inkelis. My pronouns are she, her. I'm a faculty member in the linguistics department, and one of my administrative hats is as Associate Vice Provost for the faculty in the Office of Faculty Equity and Welfare. And I wanted to speak to some of the issues that Christina just so beautifully raised, and also respond to some of the questions that we received about structural things that the campus, with its decentralized structures that you mentioned, Christina, some of the structural things that we are doing to diversify the faculty across all fields, including STEM. And one thing that we've learned is that it's not enough to want to diversify the faculty. We have to figure out what works in order to make that happen. And we've learned a lot in the last decades about the specific structural barriers which have led to a lack of diversity in faculty hiring in the past. And this has enabled us to adopt faculty hiring methods that avoid creating those barriers. So we want to hire faculty based on their excellence and their innovation and their ability to work with a diverse student body, not on how similar they are to familiar past cohorts of faculty hired over the last century and a half. So if we do that, we'll move in the direction of what should be the norm, namely more representation of research areas and of identity groups that are historically underrepresented in the academy, including those identifying as Latinx. But as Christina notes, we are not yet where we want to be, and we need to humbly double down and accelerate those efforts that we have discovered are promising. So in some ways, it starts with the pipeline and the PhD pool that produces applicants for faculty positions. And there certainly have been efforts underway for a number of years now to improve the pipeline of Latinx students who are going to top-ranked graduate schools from Berkeley. The campus has also made efforts to emphasize the importance of diversity in graduate student recruitment and enrollment here at Berkeley. There is a President's Postdoctoral Fellowship Program, the University of California, which is a great potential pipeline for Latinx and other historically underrepresented groups, though unfortunately our campus has not made as much use of this program as other UC campuses have, and that is a goal. Another really important part of this work is how we hire faculty and then ensure that they thrive once they're hired. There is enough diversity in the applicant pool that we expect diversity in the cohorts of faculty that we hire. And the Office of Faculty Equity and Welfare, where I work, has done research on what kinds of recruitment methods are most successful in preserving and encouraging diversity all the way through the faculty hiring process. So we know some of the things that work. For example, prioritizing hiring in areas that are most likely to produce diverse hiring outcomes, such as research areas that have an explicit link to issues of gender, race, ethnicity, disability, which emphasize engaged scholarship or societal improvement, which focus on subfields or disciplinary areas that have a higher proportion of scholars from diverse backgrounds. We've learned that using clear selection criteria and having diverse search committees enables us to focus on excellence and not familiarity. We have found that targeted outreach to scholars doing research in new areas helps produce more diverse hiring outcomes. And really importantly, we found that deep, thoughtful assessment of applicants' commitments and skills around diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging help to produce diverse hiring outcomes. So putting all of these efforts together, as we have been able to do in recent years, we've seen promising signs. So we know there's hope. Newly recruited faculty cohorts are much more diverse in every respect than the faculty recruited in the 1980s or when I was hired in the 1990s. But there is still a lot of work to do. So it's great that in 2020, approximately 15% of new Senate faculty hires identify as Latinx. But for the faculty overall, the 1,500 or so Senate faculty, the proportion is about 6%. And this number hasn't increased, at least since 2015, when the Chicano Latino Standing Committee report noted that Latinx faculty were at less than 7%. And that means we have much more work to do. So with that, I will turn it over to Vicki to talk about how we as a campus decide what fields to search for faculty in and how those choices can lead to increased research diversity and faculty diversity. Vicki?
Hi, I'm Vicki Plout, she, her, ella. I'm a professor in the law school, and I'm the chair of the Budget and Interdepartmental Relations Committee. That is the academic senate committee that advises the administration on matters of appointments and promotions of faculty, as well as the allocation of faculty positions. I'll note that I'm the first Latina chair of the committee, and probably the first Latinx chair of the committee ever, though I don't know that for sure. And for several years, we've had 2 Latinx faculty on the committee out of 9 total. I'd like to describe how our committee takes DEI into account specifically, and how that might connect with faculty involvement in support of HSI. So first of all, relating to what Sharon was just talking about, we do consider search areas in evaluating units' requests for faculty positions. So units will submit to us requests for, or submit to the campus requests for faculty positions, and we review them. And search areas are one thing that we do look at. A search area could be, for example, 20th century Latinx and Chicanx history, or Latinx employment and labor, or Latinos in higher education, and so forth. And this includes considering how search areas broaden and diversify the scope of a unit's academic and curricular offerings, and how they elevate work with underserved and underrepresented communities, including Latinx communities. So if Latinx experiences are missing in a unit's academic and curricular offerings, search areas that focus on this area would certainly broaden the scope. So faculty can and should push for areas that would do this, that would diversify the scope of the unit's profile. We also consider the impact of search areas in terms of the applicant pool and the diversity of the applicant pool. And this is an additional argument that you can give for searching in these areas. We also consider the diversity of the pool in terms of recommending authorization of requests at the non-tenured level or the tenured level, because often that can matter for the diversity of the pool and the presence of robust presence of Latinx applicants in the applicant pool. We also consider units trends in terms of DEIB and their past efforts and successes. So here, faculty's contributions can actually make a difference for future allocation of faculty resources for hiring more faculty. And we also consider the depth and quality of a unit's hiring plan in terms of DEIB. So giving feedback to your department that is specific to Latinx experiences that contributes to the hiring plan could also help to enhance those hiring plans and make them more successful. We also recognize DEI in the merit review process of faculty as part of 3 areas of review: research, teaching, and service. And we've also had the opportunity to provide some input on the campus's cluster hiring initiatives. A number of cluster searches were already approved that relate to the campus's general DEI goals. And as Dr. Mora mentioned, the HSI Task Force recommends hiring 10 faculty focused on Latinx scholarship across disciplinary units in the next 5 years. 2 of the clusters that might most readily help with this goal are the Latinx and Democracy cluster, which is already underway, I'm excited to say, and the Understanding Non-Citizenship cluster, which is, I think, in the infancy stages. So with that, I'll hand it back to Dr. Mora.
Great, thank you. Sorry, we're just going back and forth about order. At this point, we want more than 10 faculty lines. If it were up to me, I'd ask for 1,000. I'd ask for 150. I can ask for however many we want, but this is not going to work if we don't get a groundswell of support. Including not simply students, but also faculty, also staff, also everyone that's out there that sees us as part of our community. It's really important not only that we bring in new faculty, but that we also create opportunities to retain them and to make them also feel like they belong. The HSI Task Force and the implementation team are thinking actively about this and asking for funds for mentorship and cohort programs for the new Latinx faculty that would be coming on campus. I'd also like to remind you that spaces like LFA, the Latino Faculty Association, and the LRC, the Latinx Research Center, serve as places where faculty can feel like they belong. These are spaces where we are actively looking for resources, actively looking to advise and also push and advocate for Latinx issues on campus. And so I urge you to contact them. I also want to put your attention to the chat where we have dropped in many examples of how faculty can get involved, because at the end of the day, it's not going to be the 10 to 20 faculty that I know on campus and that I can count on my fingers and that are all tired and also teaching their classes and mentoring students and doing this service work on our downtime. It's going to depend on us making those conversations and bringing our allies to the tables. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to Oliver now.
Hi, thank you, Christina. My name is Oliver O'Reilly. I'm the Interim Vice Provost for Undergraduate Education. We received several questions about increasing Latinx student enrollment in STEM fields and also increasing recruiting, counseling, and student advising. So I think Christina's point is very valid that we have a lot to do. But we have a lot of wonderful programs in place that are working and that but need our support. So I mentioned in particular Cal Nerds and the Biology Scholars Program. We also have Pioneers in Robotics, which reaches out to high schools across the Bay Area. Be a Scientist that works in the middle schools, Girls in Engineering, and Berkeley Unboxing Data Science, or the BUDS program. These are all programs that help reach out to the local communities. They're formed by faculty and students from our campus. And this is a way that we will have of increasing the representation of Latinx students in our STEM fields. But that's not enough. And so right now the campus is also looking at how we onboard students, first years and transfer students, and how we can improve that. And not just how we can improve that now, but how we can improve that for every year. So we appreciate that there's going to be our students, incoming students, have faced challenges that we did not anticipate 5 years ago. They have learning gaps, inequities in the public education system that we will need to address. And so we will need to provide active support for these students. And we will also need to continually revise what we do every year to help with that. And we will also need to be answerable to ourselves. We will need to also ask ourselves that if we want more Latinx faculty, then we need more Latinx graduate students. And if we want more Latinx graduate students, we will need to improve how we mentor and support our Latinx students so that if they do decide to go to graduate school, they can go to graduate school knowing that they can thrive, that they can succeed, and that they have our utmost support. We need to create this pipeline just as pipelines for women were created 50 years ago. And we are now finally seeing that Berkeley is hiring 50% women and 50% men in the hiring of new faculty. It's taken 50 years. I don't think we've got that. I think people's patience has worn a little thin. So we have to work pretty hard, pretty quickly, and very deliberately on both improving how we support our Latinx students, and so how we can help them thrive. And if they decide to become faculty members, which would be wonderful, to help them with that. And if they decide that they want to go and work in the tech industry or become a teacher in a high school, that they will have our utmost support, and we will have done everything we can to help them succeed. And so now I will pass it back to Chris Gutierrez.
Well, before that, Chris, Dr. Gutierrez, can I ask you, there were a number of questions about how graduate students fit into Latinx-thriving and sort of the benchmark of becoming an HSI. Can you speak for a few minutes about your thoughts on that?
Absolutely. Because we have always thought about this as intergenerational, One of the signature recommendations that come out of the report is to promote intergenerational mentorship. We know that graduate students need to have, Latinx graduate students need to have access to the same kinds of research opportunities and mentoring and more than other students. And so one of the models that we recommended was intergenerational mentoring. So our graduate students would be really part of an effort with faculty and postdocs and undergraduates. So we've lifted them up from the very beginning. It's impossible to think about a pipeline without thinking about graduate students centrally. And because we've also thought about pipeline efforts, we've been thinking about various pipelines in collaboration with the grad division, of course, with pipelines to the professoriate. Also working with other institutions, for example, UC Merced, in which we might develop pipelines from those institutions, undergraduates into our graduate schools as well. So graduate students really are so central. They're essential for the community of undergraduates, but they're also really essential to the next generation of professors or whatever they choose in their careers. So I think many efforts have thought about this piecemeal. We haven't. We've always thought collectively about all these populations, how we can better serve them, and how they can also participate with us.
Thank you, Professor Gutierrez. Since the panelists were so great about being succinct, we have a few minutes to ask another question. So I'm sort of going to go off the cuff, and forgive me, panelists, for going off the cuff. So as we think about, everybody's talked about how important it is for everybody to get engaged on this. Dr. Mora spoke passionately about tinkering around the edges is not enough. It's all hands on deck. It's everything, all of the above. So any words or thoughts, parting shots from our panelists about what's it going to take to really get this lateral engagement moving as a campus?
We need friends. HSI is not a Latinx issue. HSI is a UC Berkeley issue. HSI is all of our issues. The public mission of UC Berkeley is not a Latinx faculty issue. The public mission is for all of us, and is to reflect the great state of California. I mean, if you're faculty on here, I know we stay here because we believe in working for a public institution. We believe in these students. And this is the time. I think this is the moment. I've been here for 10 years. I know many more senior faculty have been here much longer. Never have I seen the energy, the momentum, the real moment right now that is coalescing at this moment. I've never seen it. And I just really hope that we can all come together, that's not just Latinx, that it's all of us coming together to really capitalize on this for the future, where the state is going and where the UC system should have gone a long time ago. And so we need friends. We need all of us together for this collective.
Can I just say, so right now I'm currently a doctoral student in the Graduate School of Education in the LEAD program. And the LEAD program, the whole premise of the program is, it pretty much says that you're either dismantling or perpetuating inequity. And I think that I want us to all think about that as we leave today, and recognize that while it is important for us to build initiatives and to build new things, we also need to think about the things that we might need to dismantle at this institution because they fly in the face of our goals. And so I completely agree with Christina when she says that we need a groundswell. We don't need allies, we need accomplices. Allies cheer you on, accomplices get in there and work with you. And I think we need other people around to work with us to move this effort forward and not just support it from a distance, but really support it with their actions and their efforts as well.
One of the key components of the implementation stage is socialization. And why do we call it socialization? It's to help socialize more people on campus to developing a new mindset, a new kind of imagination about what it means to work with a diverse population, what it means to recruit faculty and students from diverse populations, and Latinx in particular. So this involves not just, this involves a lot of work together to help really create this sea change, this new way of thinking, right? How can we think anew about the kind of institution in which we really will thrive, right? Not just on paper, but in practice.
And that's a great place to wrap the panel. I want to thank you so much, Dr. Gutierrez, and the rest of our panelists. As you can see, there's a lot of ideas, a lot of work to be done. And with that, I want to hand it back over to our Vice Chancellor, Dania Matos.
Thank you so much, Fab, and thank you to all of our panelists. I needed that. In Spanish, the word is chispa, right? So I needed that spark, and I hope that that has ignited a spark in all of you where you get off this town hall and you say, okay, what can I do? Let me take all of the links in the chat. Let me nominate some folks. Let me bring that critical inquiry to the spaces that I occupy and the privilege that I held. I've been inspired about this concept of togetherness and narrative framing, right? And FAR defines community as people in any configuration, geographic, identical, bonded together over time through common interest and concern. And I will say that our Becoming a Latinx-Thriving Institution is one of those, through responsibility and accountability to one another, and at its best through commitment, friendship, and love. So this is not only head work, this is heart work. And bringing those two together are really what's going to create that thriving mission. And so with that, I will share with you, I love the honesty and transparency of this too, because one of the lessons learned is that we learned that 60 minutes is not enough to engage with you. So we did not have time for on-air questions. So we are committing to hold 90-minute town halls once a semester with upcoming topics around philanthropy, around sort of a shared language and goals on what this means. We're going to finalize the framework for implementation to create those guideposts and guidelines for that phase. We're going to have future town halls, like I said, learning our lessons and making them longer. We're going to also respond to the remaining questions on the HSI website. We want to ensure that we have that continual feedback loop, and we want to continue to incorporate your ideas and feedback concerns from the community. So I know there's lots of links in the chat. I encourage you to save it and do that. I also want to thank Sylvia Marquez, Martha Chavez, and Steve Wynn, who've been in the background just helping ensure we got to this place, and all of you for that. And so I thank you. I thank you for being on this journey with us. And then Sylvia, it sounds like you popped on the screen, so I would like to give you some airtime. If you'd like. She's saying no. The person behind the scenes and the thumbs up. Go ahead, Fab. I'll turn it over for you.
I'm just going to put some music on.
Thank you for joining us. I wish you a great end of the break, and please don't hesitate to reach out to us. Email is hsi@berkeley.edu. My email is accessible, and I'm sure anyone else here would be encouraged and happy to reach out to you. So this is not the end, folks. La lucha sigue. So thank you.